My name is Zoe, 32 years old, and I never thought I'd be the woman sitting in a hospital waiting room listening to my husband scream from behind closed doors while doctors tried to separate him from his mistress. Just 6 months ago, I believed I had the perfect marriage. We had successful careers, a beautiful home in suburban Dallas, and trust that I thought was unbreakable until that Thursday afternoon changed everything. Before I share what led to this moment, let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, please like and subscribe. This story might just give you the closure you've been looking for. I met Marcus during our first year at Northwestern University. We were both pre-med students, pulling all-nighters in the library, surviving on coffee, and shared dreams of saving lives together. He had these deep brown eyes that seemed to see right through me and hands that were already steady enough for surgery even as a student. When he proposed during our residency, getting down on one knee in the same library where we first studied together, I thought I was living a fairy tale. By the time we hit our 10-year mark, Marcus had become one of the most respected orthopedic surgeons in Dallas. His career was soaring. He'd just been promoted to department head at Presbyterian Hospital, the youngest in the institution's history. Meanwhile, I worked as a pharmaceutical researcher for a major company downtown, developing new pain management medications. We were the power couple everyone envied at medical conferences and hospital fundraisers. Our 4-bedroom house in Highland Park was everything we'd dreamed about during those struggling student years. The kitchen had marble countertops where we'd cook together on Sunday mornings, experimenting with recipes from the Food Network. The backyard pool where we'd float on summer evenings planning our future children's names. We even had a joint research paper published in the New England Journal of Medicine about innovative approaches to post-surgical recovery. Our colleagues called us relationship goals. The country club membership came naturally with Marcus's position. Every other Saturday, we'd play doubles tennis with the chief of staff and his wife. Sunday brunches became our tradition, sitting at the same corner table overlooking the golf course, reading medical journals while sharing Eggs Benedict. The other doctors' wives would often comment on how attentive Marcus was, how he still held my hand after a decade together, how he looked at me like I was the only woman in the room. But looking back now, the signs started appearing like hairline fractures in glass, so subtle you don't notice until the whole thing shatters. It began with the late surgeries. Marcus had always been dedicated, but suddenly emergency procedures seemed to pop up every Thursday night. Complex cases, he'd say, kissing my forehead as he grabbed his keys. The kind that required his specific expertise. I never questioned it. Why would I? This was the man who once drove 3 hours through a snowstorm just to bring me soup when I had the flu during residency. Then came the new cologne. For 10 years, Marcus had worn the same scent, a subtle woodsy fragrance I'd bought him for our first anniversary. Suddenly, he switched to something more aggressive, more youthful. When I asked about it, he laughed, said a patient's family had given it to him as a thank you gift, and he didn't want to seem ungrateful. The gym membership followed. Marcus had always been fit, but now he was obsessive, hiring a personal trainer, switching to protein shakes and supplements. He said it was about setting an example for his patients, maintaining peak physical condition as he entered his 40s. The separate bedrooms started 6 months ago. His back pain from standing in surgery all day made him restless, he explained. He didn't want to disturb my sleep with his tossing and turning. It was temporary, just until he could see a specialist about his discomfort. The specialist appointment kept getting postponed, but I didn't push. I was supportive, understanding, the perfect wife. The financial changes were harder to explain away. New passwords appeared on our joint accounts. When I asked, he said it was for security after a colleague had his identity stolen. The unexplained charges on our credit card statements were for hospital equipment he claimed purchases he'd be reimbursed for later. $800 at Victoria's Secret was for a charity auction at the hospital. The $5,000 charge at Tiffany's was a retirement gift for his mentor that the department would pay him back for. I believed every word, because this was Marcus, my Marcus, the man who still had our wedding photo as his phone wallpaper. When my mother visited from Phoenix for Thanksgiving, she noticed things I'd been too close to see. The way Marcus barely looked up from his phone during dinner. How he excused himself to take calls and his study door locked. The fact that he'd forgotten my birthday the month before, something that had never happened in our entire relationship. She pulled me aside while washing dishes, her weathered hands gentle on mine. "Something's different about him, Zoe," she said. "A mother knows these things." But I defended him like I always did. The promotion was stressful. The hospital was undergoing restructuring. He was carrying the weight of the entire orthopedic department on his shoulders. The truth started unraveling on a Tuesday morning in February. I was making coffee, scrolling through emails, when my phone rang. It was Dr. Harrison, the hospital administrator, his voice tight with barely concealed frustration. He was asking why Marcus had missed the emergency surgery scheduled for 6 that morning. A teenage athlete with a shattered femur had waited 3 hours for the department head who never showed. My blood went cold as I stammered that Marcus had left at 5:30, just like he told me. The silence on the other end spoke volumes before Dr. Harrison muttered something about checking with scheduling and hung up. My hands shook as I pulled up the hospital's scheduling system on my laptop. Marcus had given me his login years ago for emergencies. The calendar showed no surgery scheduled for that morning. In fact, checking back through the previous months, at least half of his supposed emergency Thursday procedures didn't exist. The late-night weekend surgeries that kept him away from home were fabrications. My stomach churned as I counted the lies. 17 Thursday nights, 23 weekend emergencies, 40 nights of deception mapped out in the clinical precision of a hospital scheduling system. The decision to install tracking software on our shared iPad came after 3 sleepless nights. I told myself it was for peace of mind to prove my suspicions wrong. Marcus often took the iPad to work for presentations synced with his phone for convenience. The app was discreet and visible unless you knew where to look. Within days, I had a map of betrayal spreading across my screen like a virus. The Ritz-Carlton downtown appeared repeatedly. Le Bernardin, the French restaurant where we'd celebrated our anniversary 5 years ago, showed visits every week, always lunch, always 2 hours. An address in Uptown I didn't recognize appeared every Thursday evening, a luxury apartment complex called the Azure. The credit card statements I'd been ignoring painted their own picture when I finally had the courage to examine them closely. The Victoria's Secret purchases were frequent sizes that weren't mine. A size 2 when I was a size 8. Bras in styles I'd never wear, youth-oriented and impractical. The jewelry from Tiffany's included items I'd never seen. A tennis bracelet, diamond earrings, a pendant necklace with an inscription I could partially make out on the receipt. "Forever yours, S." My middle name was Sandra, but Marcus had never called me S. Not once in 10 years. Finding the perfume in his car was accidental. I was looking for my sunglasses when the glove compartment fell open and a bottle of Chanel Coco Mademoiselle rolled out. The scent hit me immediately, floral and young, nothing like the mature fragrances I preferred. The bottle was half empty. When I checked the purchase date etched on the bottom, it was from 8 months ago. 8 months of another woman's scent in the car where we'd shared thousands of conversations, where he'd proposed a second time on our 5th anniversary just for fun, where we'd made love after a wine tasting in Napa Valley. The Thursday I decided to follow him, Dallas was experiencing one of those unexpected February heat waves that make Texas weather so unpredictable. Marcus left the house at 6:30, claiming an emergency surgery for a professional athlete who needed immediate attention. I waited 15 minutes before getting in my car, my hands steady despite my racing heart. The tracking app showed him heading not to Presbyterian Hospital, but to Methodist Medical Center across town. I parked in the visitor section, watching the physician's parking area from my car. He emerged from his BMW at 7:15, but he wasn't alone. A woman stepped out of the passenger side, young, maybe late 20s, with long black hair that caught the light like silk. Even from a distance, I could see she was beautiful in that effortless way that comes with youth. Her scrubs were fitted, showing curves that spoke of Pilates classes and green smoothies. When Marcus put his hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward the hospital's side entrance, My wedding ring suddenly felt like it was burning my finger. Following them inside required a calculated risk. I knew Methodist's layout from medical conferences, knew the surgical wing was on the third floor. I stayed one floor below, watching through the stairwell window as they walked down the corridor. Their body language screamed intimacy. The way she leaned into him, how his arm naturally found her waist, the kiss they shared before separating at the elevator. Not a quick peck, but something deeper, hungrier, the kind of kiss Marcus hadn't given me in months. Back in my car, I used the hospital's website to search their staff directory. Dr. Sarah Kim's surgical resident specialized in sports medicine. Her photo showed the same woman smiling professionally, looking every bit the promising young doctor. Harvard Medical School graduate. Top of her residency class. And according to her bio, working under the mentorship of Dr. Marcus Chen, department head at Presbyterian Hospital. The ethical violation alone could end both their careers. Supervisor and subordinate. Mentor and student. Husband and mistress. The technology investigation became my new obsession. Our iCloud account, created years ago for sharing photos, became a window into Marcus's deception. He'd forgotten that deleted messages still lived in the cloud for 30 days. The texts between him and Sarah went back 8 months, starting professionally discussing cases and surgical techniques. But within weeks, they'd evolved into something else entirely. "Good morning, beautiful. Can't wait to see you tonight." The shower photo she'd sent made me physically ill. His response about what he wanted to do to her in his office made me vomit. The photos were worse than the messages. Selfies in our bed while I was at work. Pictures from restaurants, her wearing jewelry I now recognized from the credit card statements. A weekend trip to Austin I thought was a medical conference that was actually a romantic getaway. The conference banner in his photos had been carefully cropped, but other images showed them at wineries, hotel pools, intimate dinners. In one, she wore the tennis bracelet, the diamonds catching candlelight as she held his hand across the table. The timeline I constructed showed the affair beginning in June, right after Sarah joined the hospital's residency program. The Thursday night pattern started in July. By August, the weekend emergencies increased. September brought the first hotel charges. October was when the apartment lease must have been signed. November explained why he'd been distracted during my mother's visit. December's credit card showed a 5-night trip to Aspen that he'd told me was a solo medical retreat for department heads. January was when the separate bedrooms started, when the physical distance finally matched the emotional gulf between us. Discovering the depth of Marcus's deception was like performing surgery on myself without anesthesia, each revelation cutting deeper than the last. The double life he'd constructed was masterful in its complexity. To Sarah, he was getting divorced. The screenshots of their conversations showed him painting me as the cold, career-obsessed wife who hadn't touched him in years. He told her we were staying together just until the divorce papers were finalized, that our marriage had been dead for years, that meeting her had reminded him what love really felt like. The secret bank account I found through a misdirected statement nearly broke me. $27,000 siphoned from our joint savings over 8 months. Transfers disguised as investment contributions, medical equipment purchases, continuing education expenses. The money funded their relationship. Designer handbags for her. Weekend trips. The apartment in Uptown that I discovered was leased under both their names. A 2-bedroom penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Dallas skyline, rent at $4,000 a month. The pregnancy scare happened in December. Their text messages revealed Sarah was 3 weeks late. Marcus's panic was palpable even through digital words. He promised he'd leave me immediately if she was pregnant, that they'd move to California where no one knew them, start fresh. He'd already looked at positions at UCLA Medical Center. Sarah's response was calculating. She wanted the head of orthopedics position at Presbyterian when he left. She wanted guaranteed recommendations. She wanted a ring from Harry Winston, not Tiffany's. When her period finally came, Marcus's relief was followed by promises. "Soon, baby. After my promotion is secure. After Zoe and I separate. Always after something." The professional misconduct ran deeper than just their personal relationship. Sarah was receiving preferential treatment in the residency program. The best surgeries. The most prestigious cases. Recommendations for fellowships that should have gone to more senior residents. Other residents had complained, but Marcus had dismissed their concerns, gaslighting them about their own performance. One resident had transferred to another hospital. Another had filed a formal complaint that mysteriously disappeared from the system. The humiliation of discovering our friends knew was perhaps the sharpest cut. Dr. Patterson and his wife had seen them at a hotel in Fort Worth. The anesthesiology department had a betting pool on when Marcus would leave me. Nurses whispered when I attended hospital fundraisers, their pitying looks following me like shadows. The Christmas party where I'd worn my best dress thinking Marcus seemed distracted by work, everyone there knew he'd left early to meet Sarah at the apartment. They'd watched me stand alone by the punch bowl, checking my phone, making excuses for his absence. Sarah's background, when I investigated further, revealed a pattern. Her previous residency in Boston had ended abruptly. Some careful social media searching showed a similar situation with a married attending physician. Before medical school, she'd been engaged to another student who'd accused her of sleeping with their professor. The pattern was clear. Sarah didn't just want success. She wanted to take it from others to claim what belonged to someone else. The thrill wasn't just Marcus. It was beating me. The prenuptial agreement we'd signed felt like Providence now. My father had insisted on it despite my protest that love didn't need legal documents. The infidelity clause was ironclad. Proof of an affair meant Marcus would leave the marriage with exactly what he'd brought into it, which after his student loans and credit card debt was essentially nothing. The house was in my name, inherited from my grandmother. Our investments were protected. He'd been so confident then, signing without reading, joking, that I'd be the one to cheat if anyone did. Meeting with Rebecca Lawson, the best divorce attorney in Dallas, felt surreal. Her office overlooked the hospital district Presbyterian visible from the window. She reviewed my evidence with the clinical detachment of a surgeon examining x-rays. The photos, texts, financial records, lease agreement. Everything pointed to not just infidelity, but financial fraud. Embezzlement from marital assets. The criminal implications made Marcus vulnerable. Rebecca's smile was sharp as she explained how thoroughly we could destroy him. But destruction wasn't what I wanted. I wanted something more poetic. My sister Emma flew in from California the moment I called her, sobbing at 3 a.m. She held me as I shook with rage and grief, my body unable to decide which emotion deserved more space. We sat on the bathroom floor, me clutching the toilet as waves of nausea hit her, rubbing my back and reminding me to breathe. "This isn't your fault," she kept saying. "You loved with your whole heart. That's never wrong." But I felt stupid. How had I missed so much? How had I been so blind? The plan formed during a conversation with Emma about our teenage years. We'd been terrible kids, always pulling pranks, finding creative ways to exact revenge on mean girls and handsy boys. Remember when you put hair removal cream in Brittany's shampoo after she spread those rumors? Emma laughed through tears. The memory sparked something. My pharmaceutical knowledge, my access to medical supplies, my understanding of chemical compounds. The idea was outrageous, dangerous, perfect. Medical-grade surgical adhesive is remarkable in its properties. Designed for instant bonding of tissue during emergency procedures, it creates molecular bonds that require specific solvents to dissolve safely. In my lab, I had access to cyanoacrylate compounds, far stronger than commercial superglue. The key was finding the right concentration. Strong enough to cause immediate bonding, but not so powerful it would cause permanent damage. I spent 3 nights researching, testing on latex samples, perfecting the mixture. The moral debate raged in my mind. Was this assault? Technically, yes. Was it justified? That was murkier. Marcus had stolen years of my life, exposed me to STD risks, humiliated me professionally and personally. Sarah had knowingly participated in destroying a marriage, violating professional ethics, planning to take even more. They deserved consequences. Real consequences. Not just the clean break of divorce, but something that would mark them, humble them, expose them as publicly as they'd exposed me to ridicule. The safety research was extensive. I needed to ensure no permanent damage would occur. The adhesive would bond skin to skin immediately, but could be dissolved with the right medical intervention. It would be painful, humiliating, require emergency medical care, but it wouldn't cause lasting physical harm. The psychological impact, however, that would linger. Every time Marcus touched another woman, he'd remember. Every time Sarah seduced a married man, she'd hesitate. It was punishment and prevention wrapped in one molecular package. The timing had to be perfect. Thursday nights were sacred to them. Marcus's routine never varied. He'd shower at 6, apply cologne at 6:15, leave by 6:30, claiming emergency surgery. Sarah would arrive at the apartment by 7. They'd have wine, always the same Chateau Margaux he'd bought for our anniversary, but never opened with me. Then they'd go to the bedroom. The bedroom with the hidden cameras I'd installed during a supposed shopping trip. I needed evidence of them together, entering willingly for my own legal protection. The bottle swap happened on a Wednesday morning. Marcus kept his personal items in a drawer in our bathroom, organized with surgical precision. The lubricant was pharmaceutical grade, a brand we'd used during better times when touching each other was celebration, not obligation. The surgical adhesive was the same color, similar consistency when properly mixed. I wore gloves, ensuring no fingerprints, no DNA evidence beyond what would naturally be there. The original bottle went into my purse. The modified one took its place. My alibi was elaborate but necessary. A medical conference in Houston that I'd registered for months earlier. Emails to colleagues about attending. A paper trail showing hotel reservations, flight bookings, conference check-in. But the flight was refundable, changed at the last minute to a later departure. The hotel would hold my reservation without penalty. I'd be in Houston technically just 12 hours after the planned incident. Emma would corroborate that I'd called her from the conference, though the call would actually be from my car in a parking garage 5 miles from the apartment. The note I left was perfectly crafted. Darling, heading to Houston for the conference. Sorry for the short notice, but Dr. Peterson had a family emergency and needed someone to present his paper. I'll be back Sunday. There's leftover Thai food in the fridge. Love you. Every word calculated to seem normal, supportive, the perfect wife maintaining the perfect fiction. I even left his favorite coffee pods by the machine, the organic free trade ones that cost $30 a pound. Thursday morning, I kissed Marcus goodbye like always. His lips barely grazed mine, his mind already elsewhere. Probably texting Sarah about their plans. I watched him from the doorway, memorizing this version of him. The confident surgeon, the unfaithful husband, the man who thought he was getting away with everything. By tonight, that would all change. The adhesive would make sure of it. The hotel room I'd booked near the airport became my command center. 3 laptops set up with different camera feeds from the apartment. My phone recording everything for evidence. Emma on video call from California, witnessing in real time, ready to testify I was nowhere near the scene. I watched Marcus arrive at 6:45, using his key, carrying a bottle of the same wine and a bouquet of roses. The roses hurt more than expected. He'd stopped bringing me flowers 2 years ago. Sarah arrived at 7:12, dressed in a little black dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. The necklace she wore was the one from Tiffany's, the one with the S inscription. They kissed in the doorway with the passion of people who didn't have to hide. The wine was opened, glasses filled, laughter echoing through the surveillance equipment. She sat on his lap on the couch, our couch from our first apartment that we'd reupholstered together, feeding him strawberries he'd bought with our joint credit card. The bedroom cameras switched to night vision as they entered. I won't detail what I saw, but it was everything my marriage hadn't been in years. Passionate, intense, athletic in ways that Marcus's supposed back pain should have prevented. They were comfortable with each other's bodies, knew each other's preferences, moved with practiced synchronization. The bottle appeared at 8:43. Marcus reaching for the familiar container, Sarah, laughing about something, both of them oblivious to how their world was about to implode. The application was generous. They were enthusiastic users, which would only make the bonding more complete. The adhesive needed about 30 seconds to begin forming molecular bonds, 90 seconds for full adhesion. They had no idea anything was wrong until they tried to change positions. Sarah's confused giggle turned to concern. Marcus's attempts to pull away became increasingly frantic. The realization hit them simultaneously. They were stuck. Completely, utterly, irrevocably stuck in the most intimate and compromising position possible. The panic was immediate and absolute. Sarah's screams could probably be heard 3 apartments away. Marcus was trying to stay calm, his medical training kicking in, but even he couldn't hide the terror in his voice. They tried everything. Pulling, twisting, attempting to reach the phone while connected. Sarah was crying, mascara streaming down her face, the confident mistress reduced to a terrified girl. Marcus kept saying it would be okay, they'd figure it out, but his voice cracked with each reassurance. The 911 call was placed at 9:17. Marcus had to explain to the dispatcher that they needed an ambulance for a medical emergency involving adhesive. The dispatcher's pause was audible even through the surveillance equipment. When asked about the nature of the adhesive exposure, Marcus's voice dropped to barely a whisper. The dispatcher had to ask him to repeat it 3 times. Yes, they were stuck together. Yes, in that way. No, they couldn't separate at all. Yes, they needed immediate medical attention. The EMT arrival was captured perfectly on the bedroom camera. 4 paramedics trying to maintain professional composure while assessing the situation. They had to call for additional resources, a special medical team that dealt with chemical exposures. Blankets were brought to cover them, but there was no hiding what had happened. The entire apartment building seemed to be watching as they were wheeled out on specially configured gurneys still attached. Sarah sobbing uncontrollably, Marcus's face the color of old paper. They were taken to Parkland Hospital, not Presbyterian or Methodist, where they both worked. Even in crisis, Marcus knew the career implications of colleagues seeing them like this. But Dallas' medical community is small. Within an hour, the head of emergency medicine at Parkland had texted the chief of staff at Presbyterian. The nurses' group chat exploded with speculation. Someone's Ring doorbell caught the ambulance arrival, 2 figures under sheets obviously connected. The video went viral on TikTok within 3 hours. My flight to Houston departed at 10:30, perfectly timed. I was through security location services on credit card, used at an airport restaurant when Marcus started calling my phone. 17 missed calls by the time I landed. Each voicemail more desperate than the last. There's been an accident. I'm at Parkland. Please call me back. I need you. Sarah made a mistake with some medical supplies. Please, Zoe. I need you to come home. The progression from composed to completely unraveled was satisfying in ways I hadn't expected. Emma called me publicly in the Houston airport, loud enough for others to hear, asking about my conference presentation. I responded with enthusiasm about the pharmaceutical breakthrough I was supposedly presenting, making sure security cameras caught me on the phone, creating alibis within alibis. The Oscar for Best Actress in a Real-Life Drama goes to Zoe Thompson playing the role of oblivious wife at a medical conference while her husband learns that Karma has a chemistry degree. The return flight on Friday morning was deliberately delayed. I needed Marcus to spend the full night dealing with the consequences before I appeared. The news had already broken on local medical gossip blogs. Prominent surgeon and resident in adhesive incident at local hospital. No names yet, but anyone in the medical community could connect the dots. My phone had over 50 messages from colleagues, friends, family members who'd heard rumors. I responded to none of them, maintaining the illusion of being at a conference with poor cell service. Walking into Parkland Hospital at 2 p.m, I was the picture of a concerned wife. Professional blazer, minimal makeup, wedding ring prominently displayed. The reception desk directed me to the 3rd-floor chemical exposure unit. The hallway was unusually crowded with medical staff who had no legitimate reason to be there. Everyone wanted to see the aftermath of Dallas's most scandalous medical emergency. I heard whispers as I passed. That's the wife. Poor thing. Can you imagine? The room was private at the end of the hallway. Marcus was alone, covered in a hospital gown, hooked to an IV delivering mild sedatives and pain medication. His face when he saw me was a masterpiece of emotions. Relief, shame, fear, guilt, all fighting for dominance. His skin was raw in places where the adhesive had been removed, like the worst sunburn concentrated in the most sensitive areas. He tried to speak, but I held up my hand, pulling out my phone, showing him I was recording everything for legal purposes. Sarah was in another room, her parents having flown in from Seattle. I passed them in the hallway, their faces tight with rage and humiliation. Her mother looked at me with something between pity and understanding. Her father avoided eye contact entirely. They knew their daughter's pattern had probably dealt with similar situations before, though nothing quite this spectacular. Sarah's medical career was essentially over before it truly began. No hospital would take the liability risk of hiring her after this. Dr. Harrison from Presbyterian arrived while I was there, accompanied by the hospital's legal team and head of human resources. The conversation was brief and brutal. Marcus was suspended indefinitely pending investigation. His department head position was terminated effective immediately. Sarah's residency was under review. The ethical violations alone were grounds for dismissal, but the public nature of the incident, the viral social media posts, the damage to the hospital's reputation sealed their fate. Marcus tried to argue to explain, but Harrison cut him off. The board had already met in emergency session. The decision was final. The police arrived next, following up on the incident report. There were questions about the adhesive, how it happened, whether any assault had occurred. I presented myself as the shocked wife, learning about the affair in the worst possible way. I showed them the evidence I'd gathered, the photos, the texts, the financial records. The female officer's expression shifted from suspicion to sympathy as she reviewed everything. The investigation would continue, but it was clear they saw this as a case of cosmic justice rather than criminal assault. Marcus's attempt to explain was pathetic in its desperation. He claimed someone must have tampered with their supplies, that this was deliberate, that I needed to help him figure out who did this. His accusations became increasingly wild. A jealous colleague, a former patient, anyone but accepting that sometimes the universe delivers exactly what you deserve. I listened with the practiced concern of a medical professional, occasionally wiping away tears that were more relief than sadness. The medical details were fascinating from a pharmaceutical perspective. The removal process had taken 4 hours, requiring careful application of various solvents, microsurgical techniques to separate the bonded tissue without causing permanent damage. There would be scarring sensitivity that might last months, possible nerve damage that could affect sensation permanently. The irony that an orthopedic surgeon might have permanent damage to his most prized appendage wasn't lost on anyone. The medical report would become a case study presented at conferences, published in journals, his humiliation immortalized in medical literature. My performance as the devastated wife was flawless. I contacted a divorce attorney in front of Marcus, scheduling an emergency consultation. I called my mother, sobbing about the betrayal, loud enough for the nurse's station to hear. I removed my wedding ring, placing it on his bedside table with shaking hands, whispering that I hoped she was worth it. Every action calculated to establish my role as the victim, not the architect of his downfall. The social media explosion was beyond anything I'd anticipated. The TikTok video had millions of views. Reddit threads dissected every aspect of the case. Twitter was calling it the most epic revenge story of the year. Someone had started a GoFundMe for the poor wife who'd been cheated on. Marcus and Sarah became memes. Glue Girl and Sticky Surgeon trending worldwide. Their professional reputations weren't just damaged, they were obliterated in the most public way possible. The investigation by the medical board began immediately. Both Marcus and Sarah faced potential loss of their medical licenses. The ethical violations were extensive. The supervisor-subordinate relationship, the use of hospital resources for personal purposes, the financial fraud of billing insurance for fake procedures to cover their absences. The investigators found more than even I had discovered. Prescription fraud, with Marcus writing scripts for Sarah under false names. missing medical supplies that had been used at their apartment. The depth of their deception was staggering. Sarah's ex-fiancé reached out to me through social media sharing his own story. She'd done the same thing in Boston, seducing his attending physician, getting pregnant, having an abortion, then moving on to the next target. He'd tried to warn people, but no one believed him. Now with this incident, her pattern was undeniable. He sent me documentation from her previous residency complaints that had been buried evidence that she'd been asked to leave quietly rather than face formal charges. We agreed to share information with the medical board, ensuring she'd never practice medicine again. Marcus's family imploded when the full story emerged. His mother, who'd initially called me screaming about ruining her son's life, changed her tone when I sent her the complete evidence file. The photos of him with Sarah in our bed. The receipts for jewelry bought with money meant for our future children's college funds. The texts about leaving me as soon as it was convenient. His father, a retired physician himself, was mortified by the ethical violations. His sister, who'd always been closer to me anyway, publicly denounced him on Facebook, calling him a disgrace to the family name. The financial consequences were swift and brutal. The prenup activated immediately. Marcus's attempt to claim shared assets was rejected when I presented evidence of his embezzlement. He owed me $97,000 in stolen marital assets. His legal bills were mounting. The apartment lease with Sarah had a massive early termination penalty. His BMW was repossessed when I proved it was bought with embezzled funds. Within 2 weeks, he went from successful surgeon to unemployed, homeless, and deeply in debt. The immediate aftermath was a hurricane of legal procedures and emotional processing. The divorce was finalized in record time, Marcus having no grounds to contest anything given the overwhelming evidence against him. He moved into a studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood. His designer furniture and surgical awards sold to pay legal bills. Sarah disappeared back to Seattle. Her social media deleted her medical career, a cautionary tale told in residency programs across the country. The last I heard, she was working as a pharmaceutical sales rep, the closest she'd ever get to medicine again. My own healing journey began with therapy twice a week, with Dr. Patricia Winters, a specialist in betrayal trauma. We worked through the stages of grief, the anger that would suddenly surge while I was grocery shopping, the moments of doubt where I wondered if I'd gone too far, the unexpected liberation of no longer living with lies. She helped me understand that my revenge, while extreme, was a reclamation of power in a situation where I'd been rendered powerless. It wasn't about Marcus or Sarah ultimately. It was about me refusing to be a victim in my own story. The support from unexpected quarters was overwhelming. Other doctors' wives reached out sharing their own stories of infidelity, thanking me for having the courage they wished they'd had. Nurses at Presbyterian would slip me free coffee when I visited for consultations, whispering their admiration. The pharmacy team at my company created a cocktail called the Adhesive Incident, served at the annual conference with a wink and a toast to poetic justice. Professional women across Dallas saw me as a hero, someone who'd refused to go quietly into the night of betrayal. My sister Emma moved to Dallas temporarily, taking a remote work arrangement to be closer. We spent evenings by the pool, drinking wine and laughing about the absurdity of it all. "Remember when you were worried he'd take half the house," she'd say, and we'd dissolve into giggles, remembering his face in the hospital. The laughter was healing in ways therapy couldn't touch. It transformed the trauma into something almost comedic, a story we'd tell at family gatherings for generations. The time Aunt Zoe literally glued her cheating husband to his mistress. Career advancement came unexpectedly. My company promoted me to head of pharmaceutical development, partly because of my demonstrated chemical expertise, partly because having someone with my sudden notoriety was good for their rebel image. I led a team developing new pain management solutions that didn't involve opioids. The irony that I was creating medications to ease suffering while having caused very specific suffering wasn't lost on me. But my work had purpose now, driven by understanding that sometimes pain is necessary for healing. Dating wasn't on my radar initially. Trust felt like a foreign concept, something other people had the luxury of believing in. But 6 months after the divorce, at a medical conference in San Diego, I met David Chen, a pediatric surgeon from Los Angeles. No relation to Marcus despite the shared surname, a fact we joked about immediately. He was everything Marcus wasn't. Transparent with his phone call when he said he would introduce me to his colleagues as the brilliant pharmaceutical researcher, not just his girlfriend. His interest in my work was genuine. His respect for boundaries refreshing. David knew the whole story before our first official date. The adhesive incident had become medical legend, and he'd heard 3 different versions before meeting me. His response was unexpected. He laughed, really laughed, then said anyone who could engineer that level of karma deserved to be taken to the best restaurant in San Diego. Our relationship progressed slowly, built on honesty and mutual respect, rather than passion and promises. He understood my need for transparency, never questioning when I asked to see his phone or knew his whereabouts. Marcus's downfall continued in waves. His attempt to rebuild his career failed spectacularly. No hospital would hire him, the adhesive incident following him like a digital shadow. He tried private practice, but patients Googled him, found the stories, the memes, the medical board hearings. He moved to Mexico claiming to do humanitarian work, but even there the story followed. A nurse recognized him, posted on Instagram, and within days the clinic asked him to leave. Last I heard, he was teaching anatomy at a community college in Montana, a spectacular fall from surgical grace. Sarah's story ended differently, but equally poetically. She married a wealthy tech entrepreneur she met in Seattle, someone who didn't know her history initially. When he found out 3 months after their wedding, he had the marriage annulled, claiming fraud. She tried to return to medicine through alternative routes, holistic healing, wellness coaching, but her reputation preceded her everywhere. The internet never forgets, and Sarah Kim would forever be the woman who needed medical intervention to be separated from her married lover. The house in Highland Park became my sanctuary, redecorated to remove every trace of Marcus. The bedroom where we'd slept separately became a library. His study transformed into an art studio where I learned watercolors as therapy. The kitchen where we'd cooked together now hosted dinner parties for my single friends, all of us sharing war stories of relationships gone wrong, toasting to our survival with expensive wine bought with our own money. My mother visited for my birthday a year after the incident. She brought photo albums from my childhood, reminding me who I was before Marcus, the girl who'd won science fairs and dreamed of curing diseases. That girl was still there, she said, just stronger now, tempered by fire. We burned my wedding photos in the backyard fire pit, watching the smoke carry away the last physical reminders of a marriage that had been dead long before the adhesive exposed its corpse. The research paper I published on molecular adhesives and their medical applications won a prestigious award. The dedication read simply, "To those who refuse to be stuck in bad situations." My colleagues understood the double meaning, the conference where I presented erupting in applause that felt like vindication. The paper was cited extensively, my expertise in chemical compounds now internationally recognized. The very knowledge I'd used for revenge had become the foundation of my professional reputation. A year and a half after the incident, Presbyterian Hospital invited me to speak at their ethics symposium. The topic was professional boundaries and the importance of maintaining ethical standards in medical practice. I stood in the auditorium where Marcus had once given grand rounds, looking out at faces that had witnessed his humiliation. My presentation was clinical professional, never mentioning him by name, but everyone knew. The standing ovation afterward felt like closure, the medical community acknowledging that justice, however unusual its delivery, had been served. David proposed on a Thursday night, deliberate in his choice of the day that had once meant betrayal. His proposal was simple, honest, nothing like Marcus's grand gesture in the college library. He said he loved my strength, my resilience, my refusal to be anyone's victim. The ring was modest, purchased with his money, chosen for its meaning rather than its impressiveness. I said yes, not because I needed another marriage, but because I'd learned to trust again, selectively, carefully, but genuinely. The wedding was small, just family and close friends in the backyard of the Highland Park house. Emma was my maid of honor, joking in her speech about how she knew I'd found the right one, because I hadn't Googled surgical adhesives in months. David's vows included a promise to never make me need to use my pharmaceutical knowledge defensively. The laughter from guests who knew the story was cathartic, transforming trauma into triumph, revenge into renewal. The true healing came in smaller moments. Sleeping through Thursday nights without wondering. Seeing a black BMW without my heart racing. Walking past Victoria's Secret without feeling nauseous. These tiny victories accumulated like compound interest, building a new life on the ashes of the old. The adhesive incident became just a story, wild and unbelievable, something that happened to someone I used to be rather than defining who I was becoming. Looking back now, 3 years later, I see the whole experience differently. Marcus and Sarah were catalysts, not causes. Their betrayal revealed strength I didn't know existed, creativity. I'd never exercised a capacity for strategic thinking that transformed my career. The adhesive was just chemistry molecules doing what molecules do when properly combined. The real chemistry was my transformation from victim to victor, from betrayed wife to brilliant scientist, from someone who trusted blindly to someone who trusted wisely. The lesson isn't about revenge, though revenge has its place in the ecosystem of justice. It's about refusing to accept the role others assign you in their story. Marcus cast me as the oblivious wife, the stepping stone to his happiness with someone younger and more exciting. Sarah saw me as the obstacle to remove the older woman to replace. They wrote their script, but I refused to play my assigned part. Instead, I wrote my own ending, one where the betrayed wife doesn't slink away quietly, but engineers a conclusion so spectacular it becomes medical legend. Sometimes the best revenge isn't planned at all. It's simply choosing to thrive after someone tried to break you. The glue that was just karma with a chemistry degree. But the real adhesive that matters is the one that puts your broken pieces back together stronger than before. Trust once broken can never be fully restored with the same person, but it can be rebuilt with yourself, and that's where real power lives. The adhesive incident will follow Marcus and Sarah forever, a digital scarlet letter that no amount of time will fade. But for me, it's become something else entirely. Proof that the meek don't always inherit the earth. Sometimes they inherit a pharmaceutical lab and a working knowledge of molecular bonds. Sometimes they transform their pain into power, their betrayal into brilliance. Sometimes they write their own story and it's a bestseller that no one saw coming. In the end, we all get stuck somewhere. Marcus and Sarah got stuck to each other in the most literal, humiliating way possible. I got stuck in a marriage that was slowly killing my spirit. The difference is, I found the right solvent. Knowledge, courage, and a little bit of surgical adhesive. They needed a medical team and 4 hours of careful chemical application. The scars they bear are physical, visible, a permanent reminder of the night they learned that karma has a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences and a very long memory. What would you do if you discovered your spouse was cheating? Would you confront them immediately? File for divorce quietly or find a creative solution like I did? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more tales of triumph over betrayal. Share this with anyone who needs reminding that they're stronger than they know. Thank you for listening to my journey from betrayed wife to empowered woman. Remember, you're never stuck in a situation that seems impossible to escape. Sometimes you just need the right chemistry to break free.